Space, the final frontier. Well, okay, not really. All right, take two. Here in the Mitten State, welcome to Code 47, bringing you all things Star Trek, spanning the quadrants, the best thing since the neutral zone.
Back again, episode 120 of the Code 47 podcast on the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. I am Charlie Carden, a Trek Lord of West Michigan, your humble servant, coming to you with my regular squad of Trekkie Treksters. To my extreme right, joined first by the Trekker from Chicago, across the pond, Jen Watson. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see ya. All right. Playing the middle square, that would be my chief engineer and regular cohort from the USS Grand Petoskey. That would be Mr. Peter Stein. Hello.
Hey.
All right. And swinging all the way over to the left on Michigan's left coast, that would be the captain of the USS Rhapsody, Mr. Aaron Heminger. Hello, friend.
Hi, everybody.
All right. How's everybody doing? Ready to talk some trekking?
Of course.
Absolutely.
I like it. Good deal. Well, first and foremost, we do want to give homage, as we always do, to the wonderful folks who make our exceptional extra work over at the Secret Friends Unite Patreon. Joy, that would be 3 of the 4 people on this call. Aaron, we got to get you rolling with something on our Patreon sooner rather than later, though I know Aaron is joining us next week for our Ghostbusters blowout, which does actually appear ad-free on Patreon on our main show. But if you visit patreon.com/secretfriendsunite, you're able to check out all this great extra fun content 1 week for free. And certainly feel free to stick around if you like what you hear. On the Friends with Benefits level, one of our top tiers, Corian HD, John Sedorf, the awesome Phoenix Sisters cosplay, Brendan Myers, and longtime contributor Matthew Keel. Our BFF top tier would be the awesome Nias family of the Twin Cities, Sean, Stella, and Henry, and your friend and my friend, Missy Merchants. So thank you so much, all of you, and everybody who subscribes and everybody who listens, even on our free feed when we toss out an occasional episode. But again, everything is free for 7 days for anyone by visiting patreon.com/secretfriendsunite. So, all right, that is the commercial portion of the show over. Let's get into actually doing some news. Now we have 2 segments instead of 1. And the first one I'm going to kind of throw at, or I'm going to throw part of it at Jen because it happens to do with where she lives. But first off, I'll kind of tip off Creation conventions, which has been around since the 1970s. They're most well known in the modern age for Star Trek Las Vegas, which is a big show that's been going on for a very long time now out there in Las Vegas in the late summertime, is looking to expand their offerings back to potentially what they did in the 90s, which is kind of a traveling road show where you end up seeing what they have to offer in other cities. Now, they just did this by bringing back a show in San Francisco, which was last weekend. Corey, who's a member of our senior staff here at the Grand Petoskey, did attend. We saw him just the other night at a little informal gathering that we have of our crew every month, and he was telling us all about it, said it was kind of an intimate affair. It's run at a local hotel there, and just has a little bit of a smaller feel than going to Vegas, which I talked about, our experience at Vegas. It was not really my scene. It's the Vegas deal is really about autographs and photo ops, which is just kind of not my specialty. So hopefully a smaller show would be a different story. So this is pretty cool news. I know, and you guys probably have heard the stories as well in the past of kind of the infamy of Creation back in the 90s. They didn't treat the guests very well. I know Will Wheaton has had horror stories. Garrett Wong has had horror stories. Any of this ringing a bell with you guys? Have you heard any of these stories in the past? Or
I've heard some of it. Yeah.
So, let's certainly hope that if they endure, and they're continuing to be successful, that it's not the case any longer. So, if any of you guys been to Star Trek Las Vegas? I feel like I've never covered that with you guys. No,
I have not, but I've wanted to for a long time. Yeah. So that makes me very excited that perhaps something similar. They'll be coming to Chicago in October, potentially October. There has been a thing with the dates where I think there was a conflict
Yes.
already with the original announced date, so they may be switching that. But I'm very, very stoked. I love going to conventions. I'm a big cosplayer. I'm building my collection of Star Trek costumes beyond my hoodie and my couple that I already have. And I've been trying to sort of recreate the feeling that I've had at Mission Chicago ever since going to Mission Chicago, which was just like, it was brilliant, and I've heard that it was nothing compared to some of the other Star Trek conventions. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, very much so. This would be totally awesome. So, I had rolled this news out to you guys, obviously when I heard about it, and I think it'd be an exceptional opportunity for the four of us to be in the same place at the same time. Maybe even do some nice promotional photography for this podcast, but overall, just kind of celebrate in general. So, I mean, what's to say about this news? But of course, Aaron and Peter, would love to hear anything you guys think about this. So, Peter, any big thoughts?
I
See
mean,
what I mean?
It's cool that it's close now,
right?
But I, having never been to a specific fandom-based convention, they look cool, but I have no idea what it's like.
Right?
You should come. It's like, I mean, Mission Chicago at least was like the Federation in action, if I can say that. Like, I mean, obviously you still had to pay for everything, but just the people around me were like, hearing people's stories from like older couples who had grown with the series since the original series, and just the kindness and love and just joy for this thing we all love was palpable. And I love that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Jen, that was, I think, before you and I even met, and it was certainly before you were ever obviously on with us here. So, but it was one of the it was extremely well attended. But that was by Reed Pop, I think, and I know that they wanted to do a follow-on event in Seattle that didn't end up materializing, and then I've just never heard anything else from them at all. So I don't know if they're out of that business, if they're planning to do something. But that was Creation is I believe not licensed by CBS Viacom, but Reed Pop was, at least at that time. So I don't know if that's changed. But who cares? I mean, if they get great guests and there's fans there and there's vendors there, which we all enjoy, that's good stuff too. Aaron, any thoughts on your regard? Have you ever been to a true Star Trek convention, as it were?
I have been to two actual Star Trek conventions in my entire life. I go to cons all the time, but I just haven't had a lot of opportunity to go to Star Trek conventions. I've even been to conventions in Vegas before, but they were not, unfortunately, Star Trek conventions. I of course, went to Mission Chicago, and then there was another one that I went to in the late 90s, and I believe that one was in either South Bend or Elkhart, somewhere in northern Indiana there. And that's when I got to meet George Takei for the first time.
Gotcha.
And I got to have a wonderful conversation with him. That was a great experience. But yeah, I love the Star Trek cons. Just like Jen said, I've always had good experiences with them. It's always been warm and inviting, and a ton of fellowship there. And I got some great stories and some great interactions, not only with celebrities but with other guests as well.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my best memories are just from the two Star Trek cons that I've been to.
Yeah, that's awesome. So. I love it. Yeah, I the very first one that I attended, I was 16, and I've shared the photo before, but it was here in Grand Rapids at a Best Western hotel, which is not a fancy hotel, but it was right around the time Star Trek 6 was coming out, so this would have been in 1991, maybe a month or so prior to that film dropping, and George Takei was the guest, and I have a side picture that my mom snapped of me like leaning over talking to him, and he's signing a postcard I have that's a picture of a still photo of Sulu from the original series, which I no longer have. I have no idea what happened to it. Or it could be at the bottom of this footlocker, which is immediately to my left, which has all my mementos. I probably should go through and scour it at some point. But yes, I went to Mission Chicago, and we went out to Star Trek Las Vegas. And then if this Creation thing becomes like a traveling deal, because if you look at their website, they do that for Supernatural. They do that for the Vampire Diaries, which are Supernatural. I've dabbled with Vampire Diaries. It's not a show I enjoy. But you know what? Those obviously get tons of fandom that come out. Otherwise, they would not continue to do them. So this is very exciting news. And, coming off the back of what was obviously successful in San Francisco, as that date gets modified and we have it in Chicago, I'm sure we have a lot of Michigan-based listeners. We have a lot of, listeners because Jen is from Chicago, hopefully friends of yours who also listen to the show. We can start to assemble and potentially even fans of the show that all of us us could meet up. So good. All right, more news on that definitely as it develops. So moving on, our second story is it's a merchandise story, which we don't always cover these. We have in the past, but we've got kind of a 1-2 punch. The first one is not super exciting, but I did go ahead and pre-order it. This summer is the 40th anniversary of Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, my personal favorite Star Trek film, which I know that's kind of a weird choice, but for me, I've always enjoyed that film kind of.
Hey, you like what you like.
Yeah, I kind of
Great
have
film.
always enjoyed it. Yeah, I've enjoyed it for its heart. I've enjoyed it for the stakes that were involved in some of the performances I thought were exceptional.
I just don't like the gut punch near the end.
Yeah, exactly. The whole movie's a big gut punch. It's a real downer, but in the end of it, we get a nice payoff. But a 4K Blu-ray and digital code release in a steel book, which it's funny. I talked about this a little bit on social media lately, but I'm finding myself tilting more back in the direction of the physical media because I've gotten less and less confident in streaming content in the last few years with streaming wars and things. Star Trek Prodigy disappearing for a while was a great example of that. Yet I went ahead and bought it digitally, which was stupid. I really should have bought the discs, but so what? Now they'll probably get their money from me again, but whatever. So I'm excited about that. Have that pre-ordered, but the real and this is coming from a company called Master Replicas, which also purchased the remaining Eagle Moss model stock. So that if you're buying Eagle Moss in this day and age, you're buying it from them. But this is a plushie of Moopsie from season 4 of Lower Decks. I have no bones, yet I must flee is the episode. This was an animal kept in a menagerie, a cage that looks super cute. The only thing it says is its own name, and it does drink bones, to which when it is revealed, Mariner, our lead character, says "holy fuck" at the top of her lungs. So this is fun. I went ahead and pre-ordered this. You will see this on our table for the Grand Petoskey as we do shows in the future. However, I'm sure Peter and Aaron will know the necessity of always positioning somebody at your props and merch table to make sure that things don't disappear via the 5-finger discount, because I figure this one would disappear pretty quickly if left unattended. So yeah, this looks fun, but in
this case, keep a red shirt between you and.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, good. A red shirt, a red shirt or a yellow shirt, depending on your era.
Crap.
But yes, no. Look, you can only snag that over at masterreplicas.com. $24.99 is the price, and I think well worth the price of admission. So good. Any other Moopsie related thoughts? Is everybody picking one up?
I've got to get one. I got to tell you, I was at Hall of Heroes Comic-Con a couple weeks ago, and that was the #1 requested item that everyone was coming up and saying, "Oh my God, we want to see a Moopsie. You got to have a Moopsie on your table." So
yeah,
they've had bootleg ones,
sure,
and they've been called axolotl. Cute Star Trek, ways of going around it. Yeah. And I think this looks a lot better than the bootleg ones. I know that opinions may vary, but it's adorable. I want one.
All right. And early name of the episode, and I rarely get to do it myself, will be Morpsey. Morpsey the bootleg Moopsie. I know. I never get them. I would say the absolute champion for episode naming is usually Jen. So it's a little victory for me. Well, cool. All right. Well, go ahead and get your Moopsie, make it a huge hit, and good deal. All right. Well, let's move on to talking about in our news segment, the Random Sode, or the random episode, an episode chosen by chance. Our very first episode of Lower Decks, our first animated episode as well, our first half-hour-long segment. We rolled the dice. Now, we rolled the virtual dice, as it were. Who chose this one? Who is the button pusher?
That would be me.
Very good. I love it. Well, I'll let you do the introduction, and if you want to do the introduction and the quick summary, go for it.
Okay. Yeah, so this episode is Lower Decks Season 1, Episode 5, Cupid's Errant Arrow. Mariner is suspicious of Boimler's new girlfriend, Tendi, and Rutherford grows jealous of a bigger starship's gear.
Ooh, all right. Well, since you've got the microphone, kick it off. What's going on in this episode?
Yeah, so this is a great episode. First off, I just got to comment on the whole the rolling thing. The entire time that I was rolling for my random episode, all I could think of in the back of my mind was, please don't be Naked Boimler episode. Please don't be Naked Boimler episode. Please don't be Naked Boimler.
You see, when you put that out into the universe, and what
Yeah.
it's going to come back to you, put it out.
And there's two options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't the one that everyone thinks of like, ugh, this is the other one.
Yeah. No, it's not that one. It's the other one.
This is the non-holodeck Naked Boimler episode.
Yeah.
But still,
This is the real deal.
Yeah, I was
as real as it gets.
I was grateful for that, because that would have been really awkward for me.
Right.
But yeah, so this whole episode starts off with there's an issue going on with there's a moon, an alien moon that is going to be imploded. And it's kind of the B plot going on with the captain and the commander, and they're all gathered with this other ship that is helping them with the relief effort, because they're trying to relocate the civilization and everything. And it's your classic Star Trek conundrum of uplifting and uprooting an entire civilization and changing them and the moral implications thereof. But of course, that takes a back seat to the fact that Boimler has a girlfriend.
How'd that happen?
That's a big shock to everyone. Mariner especially is having trouble accepting the fact that someone is in a relationship with Boimler,
right?
Because he's he's the Morty to her Rick, so of course naturally she's got to get involved, and she becomes very suspicious of this woman, and the episode largely flows around Mariner's varying theories of what this girlfriend could be, because she's got to be evil, because nobody can just like Boimler for being Boimler.
Right.
She's got to be a space monster of some kind trying to eat his brains or whatever. So a lot of that is the conflict between them, while at the same time Boimler trying to prove that he's worthy of being loved and having a girlfriend, and going to his ridiculous exploits and to prove that. And, At one point, there's this. I was laughing really hard because I found it particularly relevant, where he goes to the computer and he's like, "Computer, I need you to make me an outfit that is a conglomerate of different cool people and what that would look like, so I can
walking in here sexy as hell."
Outfit.
Yeah. It was
much. I want to see someone cosplay this, because it is brilliant.
I feel like if you Google it, Jen, that somebody
I'm sure someone has.
I think, because I feel like I've seen it. I do love in that same scene, because again, when it comes to Lower Decks, summarizing the plot and what happens is like super easy, but to me it just boils down to like quotes of great lines. So within the context of that scene, I do love it when Boimler's talking to the replicator. He says, "Give me a big beer, hot. I mean cold. I mean it's supposed to be cold."
Yeah.
Yeah. He when he walked into the 10 forward in that outfit, I was like, man, AI can do everything now.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yes, he does say, yes, replicate me an outfit boy's size small.
About that. That's so funny. That's especially funny because Dennis Quaid,
Jack Quaid.
Jack Quaid. Thank you. He's such a tall human
tall and
being.
skinny dude. Yeah.
He's such a giant man.
Right.
He's boy size. Oh my God.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funnier still because we've seen him playing the character in live action. Of
and
which he's So that must mean everyone that means everyone in Strange New Worlds is really a lot taller than you thought. So all right. Peter, moving right along. Like I said, it's weird because it's 22 minutes versus the usual 45 that we have an episode, and it's all very satirical as opposed to being super serious. So that we're kind of in uncharted ground. So talk to me about what you enjoyed about this episode, or maybe even things that you didn't.
I mean, this episode is just ridiculously hilarious, as most of Lower Decks is. I mean, this was episode 5, so it's like you're getting used to the series and you're like, okay, what is this all about? And then and then you're just like, you're sitting there going, this is obnoxiously hilarious, like the whole time. Like Boimler's going around doing his thing, trying to be like, no, I really have a girlfriend, and Mariner's like, am I gonna like see like something on the holodeck? I don't do that anymore.
One of the things that I loved was that it really evoked that, like, I have a girlfriend, she just lives in Canada trope, right?
Yeah,
and she's on the Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yep. That's true.
Fantastic.
I did note that Captain of Vancouver is a dick. Soak it in. One day you might have a ship like this. It's like you never really stop to think that. Yeah,
It's the same.
There might be, Starfleet captains who kind of think they're big, like kind of king shit versus other Starfleet captains, depending on what kind of ship they have. So it's probably akin to like someone who drives a fancy car, but again, it's the same damn ship that just has it just has a different mandate. So, I think this episode gave us a representation of the Geordie Bear, which I know I bought one at Mission Chicago because it was an exclusive item. I don't know if you guys have one that I picked up there.
I got one, but I gave it to a friend who loves Geordie.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then that was with the flowers and the gift. That was what Boimler was going to give. Her name was her name Jen? Barb, Jen. No offense, Jen. But I did find
But Jennifer was in this one.
Yeah. Oh, she was. Yes.
The first appearance of her, I think. Yeah. And that was an ad-libbed line, I believe. And they just like drew in some random Andorian and the rest is history.
I love it. There was, as Barb was talking about a mission she was on, just kind of offhandedly, space-time continuum, yada yada yada. She says, it's a good thing though, because 1920 Chicago, nobody's washing their hands, and I wrote, oh, sorry, Jen. Sorry, they were digging on Chicago. I think people washed their hands back then. That's probably not true, but I don't know. Probably,
I wasn't there in the 1920s.
Probably several hundred years from now, they probably wouldn't have a very, very good perspective on that. They do touch on, because I did take down some background notes, but it did say, yes, this is the first episode of Star Trek to depict full frontal nudity. In the first episode, use a censor bar, because that would be weird in live action. You to see, though. I mean, Kirk worked really hard to be in various states of undress.
He often didn't have a shirt.
Like contractually obligated to have his shirt ripped through the middle, like
exactly. Let's see. We do see Mariner on a Terok Noor style station, which we all assume is DS9, and was confirmed by Mike McMahon. And then first on-screen appearance of DS9 since that show ended, and last reference since it got dropped in an episode of Voyager Pathfinder. Second episode of the series to depict a Starfleet uniform from a previous live-action series, and the first to do so in color, because we did have the gold statue of Miles O'Brien, who was, of course, the most important person in Starfleet history. It says Mariner mentions Trip Tucker, which is not true, because Boimler has the line in talking about Jet, who is a tall, handsome engineer that Barb is close friends with, and Boimler gets very jealous of, that he is a Kirk Sunday with Trip Tucker sprinkles. I agree. So first mention of the Suliban outside of Star Trek Enterprise, race we've never seen before and probably won't again. But I don't know. I'd like to, I don't know, if you're a fan of Enterprise, you probably enjoyed them. They were the main villain for a little while. So, other thoughts? Like I said, it's kind of weird. We had a B plot with Tendi and Rutherford trying to be conscripted and tricked to join the crew of the Vancouver with a fancy new doodad, the T-88. A fancy new kind of tricorder. Yeah, the Ron Emanuel Docent Jr. is chief engineer of the Vancouver, and he tries to trick them by transferring himself over to be on the Cerritos versus being on his ship, because the Cerritos is broken down, even though it's the same ship. Whatever. Okay. Yes, but ultimately the whole plot line is that Boimler is infested with a critter in the back of his head that produces exactly, that produces pheromones that, yes, when it is removed, all it does is say lover. And I said the bug just says lover, 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 lover over and over again. I said it's kind of catchy. And even though
he's a big Taylor Swift fan.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of it, Barb says, well, I wasn't just attracted to you because of pheromones, but then she breaks up with him anyway because she's dedicated to her career, which, you know what, you can respect that, I guess. But the coda of the episode where Tendi and Rutherford each steal a bag of the T-88 super tricorder and present it to each other. Aw, that was pretty cool.
I don't blame them at all. I gotta get me one of them T-88s.
That's pretty fancy. I'd like to be able to walk around and scan stuff. So, other thoughts or perspectives on this episode? Like I said, go ahead, please.
I loved Mariner's red string board. I want to
That was one of
pause
my
that and
favorite
catalog
references.
all of the references because everything that she says is like an actual deep cut to something.
Yeah.
And in retrospect on this episode, just speaking on the topic of Mariner and how Lower Decks really does, it's not just joke after joke after joke. There's definitely something to it. And by the end of season 4 now, we've seen what Mariner's past is like and why she is the way that she is and why she pushes people away and all of that. And the flashback to her day on DS9, and it's like, no, she has seen stuff, and she really has seen stuff, like not just this, but like she's lost people, she's made friends, she's lost those friends, she's built this reputation around herself that she's like some kind of badass. But like even in this, we see her befriending Barb really easily, and I like that for her. And I love Mariner as a character. I think that she's amazing, and I think that she's got all of this sort of depth that season 1 episode 5, we don't know that yet, but 4 years out looking back on this, it's there.
Yeah.
That was something that I was thinking when I was watching the episode, was the whole bit of where, like, we weren't aware of it when we were watching it, but you see like that really strong attachment that Mariner has for her friends and that huge desire to make sure that they're safe.
Right.
That something doesn't happen to them again. And so it's in this episode, it's purposefully passed off as, obsessive and ridiculous. But when you look at how the character develops over time, you see that there's something there. And they touch on it with the flashback in this episode, but they don't dwell on it because the comedy is the driving point for this episode.
Yeah.
But all of that, as you said, Jen, that character development is in the background in Lower Decks, even if, so like those of us who like storytelling and character development in addition to the silliness, it's all already in there. We just have to look for it.
That's why Lower Decks is so fantastic. Like, it just builds on all of that. And you've got your deep cut references. And I watched this episode with my partner Scott, who has since been watching more Star Trek with me.
Yeah.
But like, he didn't get all the references, but it still works for him.
Yeah.
And for someone who doesn't know all of the references, and I'll explain them, and that's fun.
Yeah.
But I just, Lower Decks is great.
It's funny you should mention that about the references and not getting them. That's where Oxtra and I have always struggled, because he's not a fan of the show, but his perspective to me has always been, well, if you're not steeped in Star Trek lore, the show won't be funny to you, or you won't like it. And I'm like, I think the exact opposite is true, because they don't make the entire focus of what makes the show fun have anything to do with knowing everything about Star Trek the way that people like us do. Me and you guys, obviously, we do the show,
right.
You know what I mean? But it makes it more fun to me if you do. So I don't know. Like I said, not to bag on him. He likes things that I don't like, and I like things that he don't like, which is just that.
Everyone's got different opinions.
Everyone's got a different
and that's
take.
fair.
But
As
I know
Scotty
that
said, everyone's entitled to their opinion. Just please don't start a brawl in a space.
There you go. Exactly. Would you care to rephrase that? I know even Mark, who I do our Holocron Chronicles Star Wars show with, watched a couple episodes of this and really enjoyed it. So I think it has a certain kind of humor if you enjoy, the works of Mike McMahon and Rick and Morty, which I've only really dabbled in. But yeah, this was fun. I was glad we got to tackle this episode. And I know with our next episode, we're back to doing something a little bit more traditional. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it might be another TNG, or maybe a Voyager or TNG. We have one more before we get into Discovery season 5, which, by the way, you guys, I've seen the first 4 episodes because I got that screener, and it is a series highlight. The show is gone in a direction that will blow your mind. So plug.
Saw a review article, a headline saying that it was like Strange New Worlds meets Picard season 3.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if it's that, I I can't wait.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have notions and emotions and all kinds of stuff. It's just going to be.
Am I going to have to break out my red string board
Yeah,
to come up with all my theories?
potentially. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, because the whole thing is,
Discovery's always a mystery.
Exactly. It's a big chase. So, it ties back to Star Trek lore. There are villains. There are heroes. There's a new character who's particularly compelling, played by Callum Keith Rennie, who is, of course, Leoben from Battlestar Galactica, which Peter and I have been talking about over on the Patreon. So, and he's fantastic. So, yeah, it's just, I can't say a whole lot more because I'm not allowed.
No, don't.
But you guys will know on April the 4th, and they're dropping, I believe, the first 2 episodes on that day. So get excited. Yes. All right. Well, let's slide into getting back to talking about Star Trek Enterprise. Now, when we started, have we all been together to talk about Enterprise yet? I feel like we haven't, because I know some of us were here. This is our. We're jumping into this is actually part 3 of us talking about it, isn't it? Am I totally crazy? Because this is episode.
This is the second part of season 4.
Oh, very good. Okay,
still part 2 because
I'm screwing around with the numbers because we talked, because last time we were talking about the Augments trilogy and then the couple of episodes that were based around them coming off of the events of. No, this is definitely the third. You know what? I don't care. But anyway, we're continuing to talk about Star Trek Enterprise, but we get into another really killer 3-parter, which was it was a hallmark of this season. And, again, I was watching this when it was on. Peter, I know you came to it later. And Aaron and Jen, refresh my memory. Were you watching this when it aired for the first time? Either one of you?
No, this is my first time seeing these episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I've seen this before, but Enterprise is the show that I have rewatched the least amount just because it's one of the newer ones relative to TNG and DS9 and Voyager. Right. I started watching Enterprise, I think the first season, but I was in college at the time. So, didn't have time and had to share a TV with roommates and just kind of fell off.
So we're going all the way from me, who watched this when it was on, to Jen, who watched some of it, to Peter, who watched it after the fact, if I'm not mistaken.
I watched it for the first time in 2012.
Gotcha. And then Aaron jumping into it for the first time, certainly for these episodes. So that's cool. With that, that's a nice kind of cross section of perspective. So, all right, well, let's talk about this 3-parter kind of as a big lump, and I'll read this summary, and then I'm going to kick it. I'm going to kick it over to Aaron first. I'm going to kick it over to the first time walking into this for the first time. But let me read this. So we have 3 episodes called. And this is one of the ones that down the road we'll probably do a deeper dive on once we've exhausted all the series, which will actually happen in 2026, because I've done our schedule moving forward, and then I'm going to move on to doing some deeper dives. And this one is definitely on the mark because I like it so much. But anyway, we have 3 episodes. We have The Forge, Awakening, and The Cure Shara. So these all aired in November and then December of 2004. Great directing talent doing this. Michael Grossman for the first one, Roxanne Dawson, B'Elanna Torres herself in the second segment, and series veteran David Livesing for the third. Now, we had a writing team for the first one of Garfield Reese-Stevens and Judith Reese-Stevens. They are actually Star Trek novelists going back to the 1980s, so they are also heritage creators. Andre Boreamis wrote the second one, and Mike Sussman finished it off. So interesting to have a kind of a multi-parter have 3 different creative teams. But I mean, as I think we'll go on to illustrate it, I didn't really, I couldn't have picked that out of a hat. But anyway, the summary of the 3: Earth's embassy on Vulcan is partially destroyed by a bomb, killing Admiral Forrest. Boo! Archer and T'Pol travel to Vulcan in search of an alleged terrorist group blamed for the explosion, of which T'Pol's mother turns out to be a member. That is awkward. In part 2, Archer and T'Pol meet the group's leader, T'Pau, who is a recast from the original series. T'Pau, excuse me. T'Pol, T'Pring, to this, to that. Yeah, many T apostrophes out there.
Vulcan names sound very similar to us humans.
It's very true. And they obviously bump into T'Pol's mother, and they learn that Archer is carrying the Katra of Surak. Oh my, or Surak if you prefer, who is your contemporary Vulcan Jesus, if you will. Archer and T'Pol in part 3 bring the Cure Shara, Surak's artifact, bring it back in Shrek's artifact that will lead to vast changes on the Vulcan world. T'Pol's Pinar syndrome is cured by T'Pol, which is awesome. All right. So with all of that, I'm going to kick it over to Aaron. Aaron, talk to us about this 3-parter. Where were you feeling? I know you and Jesse frequently watch these together. But yeah, break it down for us. Tell us how you're feeling.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought the acting was really well. All 3 episodes, I should say. I feel the acting was really great across the board, and I thought it was a pretty compelling story. I was sad to see the death of the admiral at the beginning.
No, he was great. Von Armstrong, I've met him he was on the cruise, and we saw him again in Vegas. Super nice guy.
Yeah.
Super nice guy.
I mean, he's a character that isn't front and center in the show, but he got such enough attention and development over the course of the show that you feel something when you lose a character like that. And I really appreciated that, because too often than not, you get these characters that are brought in as a once-timer, and we hardly have a time to get to know them before they're exited violently from the show. So to say, but this was kind of rewarding in a lot of ways, and you can really feel the weight that Archer has to carry, losing this person that he worked with and had a close relationship with everything, and that's just good writing, and we don't see enough of that these days. So I really appreciated that. I also really appreciated more of a deep dive into the Vulcan culture. That was really interesting to me. And the one, there's a lot of discrepancies between newer shows like Enterprise and the established canon and everything, especially with the way the actors portray the Vulcans, because I feel like at times they're almost too emotional the way they play the Vulcans, but at the same time, within the context of the show itself, it really works. And I enjoyed seeing, especially T'Pol, the way she played the character. They're so good at portraying such subdued emotion with their performances that it feels probably more real in a lot of ways, because you can tell that they're going through something without them overacting, and that's such a hard thing to do. I've been involved in stage plays and productions before. I do a lot of acting myself. That is so hard to do, is to show emotion without showing emotion in such a way. And just my hats off to every single pointy-eared actor on that show. They
pointed it up, points to the sky. Boop.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really great. And the one thing my wife and I always love when we watch Enterprise with the Vulcan cast is when we see them getting into these like discussions where they're just very polite and concise discussions to the layman, but we're just sitting here watching going, man, that was such an outburst.
Yeah. Oh, look, just calm down. All right. That's enough.
Yeah.
So I have always had a very weak handle on your emotions.
I have stubbed my toe. Ouch! There's no need for an outburst.
Yeah. So that's kind of like a little game that we like playing. Like, she was in the kitchen at one point. She was getting a snack or something, and somebody was having an argument at a table, and I could hear Jesse in the other room going, "What an outrage!"
Yes. I'm very offended. Oh yeah, a Vulcan version of Clutch the Pearl. So that's not a episode title either.
Yeah. So there was a lot of this episode because there was a lot of tension with all the Vulcans and everything, and I feel they all did a fantastic job, and just it was just a delight. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing Sirach, a legendary figure, kind of presented in a really interesting way. And Archer's interaction with him. I kind of kept putting myself in Archer's position the entire time, and like, how would that conversation with me go with Space Elf Jesus? I mean, what an opportunity to have that
name change.
Yep, that's it.
Oh my God. Speaking of space elf Jesuses and things of that nature, I'm going to jump in with just 2 pieces of commentary on casting. Our core villain at the Vulcan Ministry, the government agency that is disbanded at the end of this 3-parter, is played by Robert Foxworthy, who was a very bad Admiral in a great two-parter on DS9 in season 5, where he tried to overthrow the Federation with a military dictatorship predicated on the fact that, oh man, changelings are everywhere. It was very much a Red Scare. Yeah, exactly.
That guy.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And then the final exchange, which was Robert Foxworthy after he gets the boot, having a conversation with the shadowy figure who turns out to be a Romulan, and remember, nobody's seen a Romulan in 100 years at this point, was played by Chicago's own Todd Stashwick with no beard. Yeah. Honest to God. I've met him on several occasions, the most recent of which being the cruise. What a super great guy. I really, he's a dude that and he's very big into D&D, and it's all over social media if you follow him on Instagram. He's a guy, and I did actually on the cruise, and I mentioned this on our cruise cast, different people were shouting out drink orders, and some of us in the order to bring to the people on stage during one of these readouts. He shouted he wanted a whiskey. I ran to the bar, got a whiskey for me and whiskey for him. And it was after things had started, and I kind of tapped it on the bar, and he was the last one in a chair over to the side. He reached over and grabbed it, and we had a little clink, me and Todd Stashwick. So that was, not exactly a claim to fame, but a vague brush with such. All right, let's move it along. Peter, your thoughts?
I thoroughly enjoyed these episodes. I mean, I'm not quiet about the fact that I really like how season 4 tends to tie a lot of the lore back into Enterprise in a really, really healthy way. And I quite enjoyed how these particular ones not only explore Surak in a little bit more thoroughly, but also help to explain why the Vulcans were behaving differently this entire time.
Right.
Yes.
Watching Enterprise, we're like, why are the Vulcans such dicks?
Yeah, big time. Big time.
Like from episode 1 with Broken Bow, you're just like, what? Like,
why?
Like, why are they such assholes? And so finally you get to this point, you're like, oh, okay. This makes sense.
Now I get
And so these are the sorts of things that I really, really appreciate. And it's something that I really, really like about Enterprise Season 4 is how they take things that either you're like, what? Or they take something from later and then tie it in like, this is a seminal form of it. Or this is a tie-in. But it's not like punching in your face necessarily. Like with these ones, it didn't feel like that. It was just like, hey, we're going to Vulcan and we're going to delve into Vulcan culture a little bit and explain why they've been different for so long. Like we finally get to see the Forge, which is something that we only saw in books, and I think the one animated series.
Yeah, where we learn about the Sellet.
Where we learn about the Sellots and everything, but now you get to see one in live action. Sort of.
CGI in the dark, which worked for the budget.
Yeah, and then you have the Vulcans who can Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Krayt Dragon. So
right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was kind of funny. But like there's a lot of interesting stuff here. There's a mind meld between, a Vulcan and a human with a Katra passing on. So it's like, oh wait, that has happened before.
Right. Go back to Lord.
So those of us are like, oh wait, okay. And so there's a lot of things that like if you don't make those connections, that's fine. The story stands on its own. But it's really cool for me the way that especially with the Reeve Stevens, because that's just what they do.
Right.
That's like the thing that they do.
And they wrote, if I'm not mistaken, and this is without really looking at it, they wrote some of the more seminal Vulcan-related novels in the 80s. So like the Spock's World, I think might have been one of their, maybe that was Diane Carey.
I think they may have written Vulcan's Forge.
There you go. Yeah.
So, but there's just a lot of good things going on here. I thought it was funny as a side note seeing Selleck playing a Vulcan in the background.
Yeah.
So, and I did see Todd Stashwick. I thought for a second that he also played one of the Vulcans in the security team that went after them in the Forge. The guy who gets punched in the face.
Unless I'm mixing it up. I might be mixing it up.
I'm pretty sure that was him.
But the other guy super duper looks like Todd Stashwick. I don't know. Unless that was his like distant cousin and he played both roles. I gotta have to do some research.
But it was just interesting seeing like, oh look, people who are in Star Trek are in Star Trek.
Yeah, right. You just don't recognize them because
it's just entertaining for me to see that.
Pointed ears and a bowl cut and, no facial hair.
And of course, Jeffrey Combs is always a joy to see playing Shran.
Right. Oh,
Shran, the amazingly dickish Andorian with a heart of gold. Like,
yeah, exactly.
He's a great character.
Yeah, he wants to be good, but he's good in his own way to himself and to his people. And
then we have some really good character development for Saval in these 3 episodes, where we have like the Vulcan who, like, through the rest of the show, you're just like, this guy's a dick, and then finally he comes around, and you're just like the one thing that I thought was very, very funny was the thing in the Situation Room on Enterprise. And it's like, you are such a, I forget what they said, and then he was like, I have gained a great affinity for your planet over the years that I've been.
Right.
And Tucker was like, well, you managed to hide it real well. And he was like, thank you. And I was like,
you should have said,
okay.
and I can't tell anyone how much I love Southern fried chicken because we're vegetarians, but no.
Yeah. I mean, that was probably the next line that happened when the camera.
Exactly.
So but there's just lots and lots of good stuff here. And of course, also with T'Pol and her mother and the resolution, there's sort of a resolution there. It's very sad, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's resolution there. Her T'Pol's husband, that development, it was very good, I thought. In the sense that he's like, I know why you assented to this, and I'm not going to hold you to that.
Right. It was a very it was a sacrifice, which you don't necessarily see these very traditional Vulcans doing.
Yeah, we don't really think of Vulcans as doing that sort of thing, and yet we see in an episode that's about Vulcans growing beyond how we've understood them, we see a Vulcan doing something that is not something that we normally see, and something that actually is more akin to something that Spock might do,
right?
With some of that more human element of self-sacrifice, which, because it's not for the needs of the many, it's just your needs above mine, and that's just something that we don't see a whole lot with a lot of characters. And so it was just a really good, even though he's not in the show very much, he's like used for transporter codes, like once. And he brings the Idic in the beginning. Like that's the only things that he does. But the scene between him and T'Pol in the end is also really
you're right. For the purpose of this episode, he's the guy. I know a guy.
Yes,
like I know a guy, like the Star Trek's weed guy. I don't know. Probably not a great analogy, but anyway, Jen, take us home. Your thoughts on this 3-parter?
Man, I think Aaron and Peter covered a lot of what I wanted to say about this, especially how, I mean, for me, this is that trilogy that, like Peter said, explains why the Vulcans were such dicks in the first part of this. And also agreeing with this is what Enterprise does, especially in its later seasons, where it sort of ties everything together. Sometimes not so well, as we will see later this season, but this was very, very well done, very excellent. I love the character arc for T'Pol, and her realizing what she needs to know in order to develop further and give herself permission to grow, especially beyond what she has assumed so far. Archer's role in the whole thing is also, with him carrying Surak to his Katra, that's development of Archer as well. So like character development, it's really interesting to see how much farther this would have gone if we'd gotten a season 5.
Right.
But so far, I really like this trilogy. It's really good.
And speaking of season 5 as a special treat, when we are done talking about season 4, the episode that follows in our segment 2, we are going to talk about season 5, rumors that have always persisted, things that would have happened, and then just our own personal thoughts on what we would like to have seen. So that's something I've had planned for a very long time. So
very cool.
You guys have said it all, so I'm totally fine with kind of passing the baton and moving on. We do have another 2 episodes, and Aaron, I'll kick it back to you to talk about episode 10 of the season.
Okay, episode 10, Daedalus. Let's see here. Okay, so this was again. I always get this confused. Is it director and then writer that we have written here?
I believe so.
All right. Director David Livingston, written by Mike Sussman, and the original air date for this was December 3rd, 2004.
I think
you're looking.
I am reading the wrong one because I'm not wearing my glasses today.
Oh man!
And I should have known that was.
Lean in. I can help. I can help you out if it makes your life easier. So
no,
anyway,
I got it.
Yeah. Okay.
I got it. Sorry. David Stratton was the writer. Alan Brennett and Ken Lazebnik were the directors.
Sure, why not?
Okay.
Swap that.
Swap it?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't.
Oh
okay.
man, I was trying to help you out, keep you involved, and look what you embarrassed.
It's okay.
Me.
Yeah, I did it. I did it to myself. Anyway, original air date, January 14th, 2005. This is Dr. Emery Erickson, inventor of the transporter, conducts a long-range experiment in order to recover his lost son.
Dun, 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 dun. So we get another. So this guy was a contemporary to Archer's dad, who was Henry Archer, who quote unquote, they would say, oh, he invented warp drive, he was the human developer of a certain level of the warp engine. So there you go. That doesn't really fit so great on a business card. But this guy coined the transporter, which, as we saw at the beginning of the series, everybody was like, oh, I just don't know about Beeman and this thing and that thing. And even there's a line in this episode that even Archer talks about, says, well, if given a choice, I'll still ride a shuttle pod. So yeah, even, 4 years in, people are still really iffy about the transporter. But in this episode, this guy he's disabled. He's got this weird affliction that you see his spine, and he's got like a Klingon back because the spine is all wonky, and that's why he can't walk. And
it's like he had transporter accidents when he was working on it.
They probably didn't want to bring that up. Not much of a selling point. Well, this is what happened to me, but we totally fixed it now. It's good. But he's on board, and his adult daughter, who is a very close friend of the captain, and he's kind of working behind the scenes because in this area of space where he's going to conduct this experiment, blippity blop, whatever it is. But his real intention, which of course he hasn't told Starfleet about, is that his son's transporter. He has a son who got lost in a transporter accident or a test many years back, and the effort is to use this to bring him back and all this different kind of stuff, which ultimately doesn't end up working out. So I thought this episode did a nice job of making you really care or feel for kind of a one-off character. Plus you've got the actor whose name is going to escape me, and I got to jump into the description. He's a African-American actor who you've seen in a billion different things, and his name is Bill Cobbs, who I would not be surprised has since passed on. So this was 20 years ago. Bill Cobbs, who is still alive. Holy cow. At age 89. Yeah.
Good job, Bill.
Bill Cobbs of Cleveland, Ohio, who's been in, he's that guy who's been in a billion different kinds of things. I think that this episode did an exceptional job of making you care about a one-off character and tying it back to the transporter. It seems to remind me, it kind of ties me back to an early episode of TNG, Too Short a Season, where you had the Admiral who's again dying of an affliction, but gets his hand on this alien herb that he takes too much of, and it Benjamin Buttons him back to a younger age, but then eventually kills him. But he's trying to atone for, in that case, trying to atone for a terrible crime, which was starting a genocidal civil war that killed a lot of people on an alien planet. Where this guy's just trying to get his son back, but he didn't want to trust Starfleet with that information. A crewman ends up dying because of some carrying out this secret experiment, and in the end the guy atones for it, but they do rescue his son, but his son dies as soon as he comes out of the train. He does not get the nice Scotty treatment of having the coming out of a beam and surviving. So I don't know, that was my thought. I liked it. I thought they did, like I said, I think they did a nice job of making you actually feel something for kind of a one-off character, and again a great actor who delivered a great performance. Peter, your thoughts?
This episode works. It's not my favorite.
Yeah, I hear you.
Like, I don't know if it's because this is one of the canon points that I do get a little sticky about, is the invention time period of the transporter.
Yeah.
So part of it is just, it annoys me that it exists at this point.
Yeah. So that's
a minor nitpick, because generally Enterprise is pretty good about like allaying my concerns with that sort of thing. But I really like the interaction between Archer and the daughter, whose name is escaping me for some reason. I just watched it yesterday. You'd think I would remember. But
the daughter is Danica.
I really like the interaction between the two of them. I thought it was interesting how like she put her life on hold to take care of her father after her brother disappeared. Because I've seen that with family. I've seen like that's something that's a very real thing that happens. And so it was just interesting to see that portrayed on screen, and not portrayed as something horrific, but just this is just something that she's doing for her father.
Yeah.
And that's something that does get resolved at the end of the episode, which I thought was also an interesting thing. It's not like a major point. It's not super, super important, but it's something that I liked how it got kind of woven in there a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure. The interaction, there was part of me that was half sitting there like, if season 5 came around or something, I'd love to see Danica back on the Enterprise with Archer.
Right. Because they set it up.
There seemed to be a good rapport there. I don't know if that would have led to anything. Part of me wanted it to, because I like the interaction between those two characters.
Yeah.
They had good chemistry.
Yeah,
they had good chemistry. And so it was just one of those like, man, I could see these two getting together. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah,
would it ever happen? I don't know. She's in one episode. But it was just a passing thought as I was watching this episode.
That's I never thought about it that way. You're right. That was because you ever really see he has chemistry with the other Starfleet captain who we saw earlier in the season, Captain Hernandez, who in beta canon her ship gets destroyed and lost in space. So obviously it should beta because there's never been any alpha canon to really define, did he have a family or whatever. There was some vague written stuff that we end up seeing in an episode shortly here about his history, but we don't really know in a lot of ways, like what else he did with his life and different stuff. So
yeah,
interesting perspective. So Jen.
I like this episode. Again, not necessarily my favorite one, but I like how it sets up the mystery. And the beats are fairly obvious when he's working on the transporter. Oh, he's someone's missing and there's some weird thing happening. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's got to be his son. And it's like, I've watched this so long ago, I don't know if I'm remembering or doing pattern recognition, but like, the beats are there for it to be clear that that's what's happening. I like the fact that they keep referencing the fact that a crewman died.
Yeah,
like it's not just a one-off. I refer to him as a red shirt in my notes because that's kind of how he's used as far as the plot is concerned. But
he was more. Go with red stripe. He was
red stripe,
like the beer that they have in the Caribbean. The red stripe.
The fact that someone was lost is brought up consistently.
Right.
So
which is great because it seems like it gets lost sometimes. Yeah.
It does sometimes get lost. And the fact is that this era of television is when you're starting to see more serialization. You're starting to see a little bit more verisimilitude brought in. So you have things that are not necessarily resolved, but do feel real. Like Peter said, her coming in and like putting her life on hold for her father. And it's not portrayed as good or bad, like you said. So the different people's reactions to things and him coming on, the old childhood friend that's not necessarily set up to be a girlfriend, but like this level of realism that I appreciate that you don't always see in the shows that came before.
Right. So just tilting a little bit more to real life-ish, and dealing with situations. Yeah, I like that's good perspective. Good perspective. Yeah. All right, Aaron. Take us home. Your thoughts as a first-time viewer of this episode.
Okay, yeah. I think I got a little bit of a different take on this one than the rest of you do.
Please.
I going into this, when I was reading the synopsis and everything, I think this episode was one of the ones I was most excited to see, because to me, the transporter, in the context of the show, is such a terrifying piece of technology in a lot of ways, but it's just the common everyday thing that it's a way of life. It's as common as cell phones to people in this genre. And I'm like, there's so many implications to what it means for our existence as living sentient beings, and the spiritual questions and all that. So I kind of feel like when I went into this, I had this idea in my head that I was really hyped to see an exploration of some of the ideas that don't really get discussed on the show, of what the transporter means and everything, and we kind of didn't get anything along. It was
some tongue in cheek while they were eating dinner.
There's a brief conversation about it in the beginning, which I liked to see, but it wasn't explored further.
Yeah, I was kind of like, it was just a brief conversation, and I was like, that could have been a whole episode. But it was like, it felt like a what was it, the thanks for smoking writers from that movie with Aaron. It was like,
Right.
we'll just explain the fact they can smoke in space. So thank God we invented the carbon filter system. It felt like that to me, and I was kind of disappointed. Overall, the episode just really didn't do it for me. I felt like it was a lot of missed opportunities in terms of exploring the depth of the transport system. It was missed opportunities in terms of. I knew 10 minutes into this episode how it was going to end.
Yeah, that's not so great. The stakes were low and the mystery was low. Yeah,
it was predictable. It was like Daedalus. Okay, so this is gonna I didn't know the sun was involved when I didn't see that in the original synopsis. I just kind of skimmed it, and I said Daedalus. I'm like, okay, so his son's trapped in some sort of transport, and he's going to risk the ship to save his son. I knew. I felt kind of disenfranchised by that. So
sometimes episode names are a little on the nose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember I was going to I can already see where this is going because of the name. And she's like, what's the name? Daedalus. And I was like, well, Daedalus, the Greek inventor who invented the wings for his son. He flew too high and he lost his son.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so I know how this is going to go. So, and I felt like there were some real attempts at horror here with the manifestation of the sun in his incorporeal form and the death of the a crew member and everything like that. It was an interesting mystery. I think it was well done. I like the way that they kind of lean into horror with the lights going out, the darkness and all. It was kind of a ghost story in a lot of ways, which I appreciated that. I agree with a lot of the things that you all said, like the Danica Archer ship. 100% on board with that. I thought they had great chemistry. Loved it. Would have loved to see more of that develop. And I, Dr. Erickson himself, you felt compassion for him and what he was going through for sure. I'm not a monster. I don't want to say that I didn't feel. I don't think this was a bad episode. It just, I think in my mind I overhyped it and I disappointed myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going into this episode expecting a metaphysical discussion and you get a ghost story, they're not the same thing. So
So kind of throws you off your axis. All right, well, cool. Well, let's move along. And again, it's weird. I thought, this will be a shorter episode, but we're already at an hour, so we're kind of in our standard plug because there's been a lot of really great discussion, which I love. But episode 11 is Observer Effect. Peter, if you would be so kind.
All right, so episode 11 is Observer Effect, directed by Mark Vehar, written by Garfield and Judith Reeves Stevens, aired January 21st of 2005. Organians, bet you never thought you'd see them again, test the Enterprise crew by observing their reactions to a deadly silicon-based infection.
I know, and they
said another thing that you didn't think you'd ever see again, but there it is.
They kind of slid that Organians bit onto the end. So, again, the Organians, that is a deepish cut back to the original series. The Organians, we got them right along with the Klingons, and they were the people that essentially put a stop to yet another Federation Klingon war, which happened in the episode Errand of Mercy in the first season of the original series. Cool race, but non-corporeal, all-powerful. But this is apparently illustrating of how they spend their time otherwise is, they stumbled upon this planet that's always had this virus, which is deadly to organic life forms. And they just basically plug themselves into a couple of members of that crew and take notes as the people are all infected and die within, whatever environment they talk about, Klingons being because that's how our people discover this. So we have Hoshi and Trip down on a planet rummaging through a Klingon like garbage scour or whatever it is, whatever the setup is at the beginning. And they're coming back to the ship and Trip passes out and they both end up in decon for the entire episode while Malcolm and Travis are being occupied by these two Organians, and they're talking about, well, in blah 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 percent of the cases, everybody dies by doing this thing and this thing and that thing, and they're going back and forth, and we're seeing our people get more and more sick. And then the Organians start popping around and looking at things kind of differently. And then ultimately in the end, because, again, stakes, right? So they're not going to kill off two members of the main cast, somehow things are going to end up working out. But it's, they do bounce around, and ultimately they decide to save our people because they have ability for the first time in 1,000 generations to cure this infection, which they do. And of course our people live, and then the Organians disappear, and there's no memory of anything. I don't know. What do we think, guys? Jen? Deep thoughts.
I didn't
Winding up.
I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I fell asleep in the middle a little bit.
And I think that
it was very
probably didn't affect your enjoyment.
No, it was very kind of just it was a little bit dry for me.
Yeah.
It was a little hard to follow when you had the Organians leaping from person to person. Leaping, interesting,
Yes.
saying with the sandbag of it all.
Yeah, the sandbag.
But yeah, not intentionally saying that, but like when they're jumping around from body to body, and it's like, I'm not sure what they're getting at or what's going on, and it's presented in a way that's they're trying something with the perspective on this one that I don't think was necessarily that effective, but I admit I fell asleep a little bit. So I'm not sure that I'm the right person to make that call necessarily.
An affirmative statement to the quality. I fell asleep in the middle.
Shrug, big shrug. It reminded me a little bit of the Voyager episode where you had the aliens doing weird experiments on the crew without the crew knowing.
Scientific method.
There you go.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of DS9's Dramatis Personae in there where you pick up something from the random Klingon, right. And
ironically, yes, it's exactly.
Yeah.
But so either everybody turning on each other, or the Janeway at the end of it still Janeway's her way out of it. So. Which those are both great, but this one, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. This one didn't work for me.
Yeah, I hear you. Aaron.
I didn't think it was a bad episode. I enjoyed watching. I always love episodes that really explore moral conundrums, and we get a lot of that in Star Trek, and that's one of the major reasons I'm such a big fan. It's interesting seeing the Organians return, and it's kind of that classic trope of this advanced society that they've gone so far and they've evolved so much. It's almost like this idea that morality and ethics in a lot of ways is like a circle, and eventually you go so far one way of being high and mighty and evolved and compassionate and everything that you just kind of end up becoming a dick. And
or Dick-anians.
Yeah, and we kind of see that. It's kind of like watching this. Every time I'm watching these highly evolved species treat other races like dirt, I'm just like, you forgot where you came from, and that is the greatest loss of all. And that's true of most people. We always got to remember, keep it humble where we come from, our origins, and we never know what it's. Yeah, you never know what someone else is going through, and hats off to them to literally putting themselves in other people's shoes to try and experience things from their perspective. I mean, that's a unique literal take on that idea. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed that. I enjoy a good contagion outbreak episode. Those are always fun, especially seeing the stress and everything, and seeing Phlox do his best to try and find a cure for something that's fundamentally impossible because it's silicon virus. Humans are carbon based. It's not going to end well.
The chocolate, the peanut butter, I get it.
Yeah, I get it. It was. I will say my favorite moment in this episode was probably at the very end, where Trip and Hoshi are kind of at death's door, and their Phlox and Archer are in their containment suits, and they're trying to save them. And it gets to the point where, well, we can't operate the instruments we need wearing an EV suit, and Phlox is about to take his stuff off, and Archer's like, no, I'll do it. I'll be your hands. And he takes off his EV stuff and exposes himself. And I thought that was a great moment because it shows what a compassionate leader Archer is. And I have so much respect for that character, and seeing how he's willing to sacrifice himself for his people like that without even hesitating.
Yeah.
I found that very inspirational, and that was my favorite part of the episode. And that was kind of my takeaway from the whole thing.
Good deal. I like it. Awesome. Peter, take us home.
I was actually going to bring up that Archer thing too, because that was probably also one of my favorite parts of the episode, was how Archer just decided to, like his line of like, we need a doctor more than we need a captain. And, like, that was such a good line there. It's like, I know when I'm important. I know my skill set, and right now it's not this.
Yeah.
So like, that was just really good. I enjoyed some of the moments where Hoshi and Trip are just kind of sitting in the decon chamber talking about stuff. We got some insight into Hoshi a little bit more, which was kind of good. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I don't like how people simplify math things, which was just how she got out of the decon chamber. It's like, it's just patterns. It's like it's programming. There's okay. So it's a little bit more complex than that. So that was, it made for a moment, but it was interesting. But I liked that. The one part that made me laugh out loud was I know where we can talk, where we're not going to be interrupted. And you see, Hoshi and Tucker, who have been given horse tranquilizer, are suddenly stand up and start talking. It's like, you think that Phlox isn't going to notice this. You are, for an advanced species, you are pretty dumb. And then in fact, we have that happen where Phlox just is like, what? And that's how he knows something is wrong. And they're like, someone's watching us. No shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, right.
So it's just like, there's some moments in it that are just hilarious, particularly those ones. Or when it's like, Travis comes up, is like, I have these questions for you. It's like, good night, Travis, and just shuts the door in front of him.
Yeah, right.
Like, there's a lot of like, I
night,
don't think you quite understand how to surreptitiously investigate things on this particular ship. It may have worked with other ones, but clearly not on a human ship.
Yeah, right.
So I like, that was entertaining. I did like, to Aaron's point, the part where Archer like says to the Organians, it's like, you've lost your humanity for basically, of like, you're so evolved. And that's the conflict that we have between the two Organian characters. It's like, one of them has been on these missions for 1,000 years or something. And then this guy, the other one, who often inhabits Travis, has only been like, this is his first or second or something. He hasn't been there that long.
Right.
And so he's like bucking the whole thing of like, this isn't humane. This is horrible. Why do we let them die? Like, seeing how they handle it, okay, fine. But why are we like just letting them die at the end? That's not good. And so eventually he's like, I want to do something. The other guy says no. And then Archer, and that's where the confrontation with Archer happens, and they finally we don't know exactly what happens or how they change their mind or who in non-corporeal ways beat up whom, because clearly there was a conflict.
Right.
But eventually we have it's cured and no one remembers how or why, which is a nice little cover, as Enterprise has been good at doing, because the Kirk's Enterprise didn't know about the Organians having non-corporeal traits when they visit them in Errand of Mercy, and so keeping that away was something that was
right.
It was a nice little nod to the fact.
Having the Borg and having the Ferengi without calling them the Borg and Ferengi. We got away with it.
Those are some continuity attempts that are not as good as these ones in season 4. Season 4 is where Enterprise really figured out how to respect continuity and do it properly.
Exactly.
But they always tried, but they got it better in season 4.
Yeah, no doubt. So. Just unfortunately, it was just a little too late. So, well, all right. Well, that wraps us up talking about these episodes. But let's go around the horn, and Aaron, we'll start with you as the first timer to these segments. Let's have a favorite, and again, you get the choice of 3, or if you wanted to look at the different segments of the 3-parter as individual, I'll give you that regard. But let's have a favorite, and let's have a least favorite.
Well, I gotta say, I think my favorite one would be the final episode of the Vulcan 3-parter, Kirshara. I thought that was really great. I love seeing the conflict with the Andorians and the Vulcans coming to a head with that whole thing, and the introduction of the Kirshara, like we talked about, how it kind of helped bridge the gap between the unethical performances of the Vulcans in this series to the more familiar depiction of them as being more benevolent and kind in later episodes. I thought the whole thing was fantastic. I loved it. It was a solid episode. Least favorite for me is, I'm sorry to say, it's going to have to be Daedalus.
Yeah.
For all the reasons I listed before.
Totally. Gotcha. Jen?
Least favorite is Observer Effect.
Yes.
Which, not knocking the episode, it's not bad. It's just what it is. I do think I agree Kirshara was the best of the 3, if we're going to go with the best of the 3, where you're really coming to this climax for T'Pol and her characterization and the explanation, recontextualization of the Vulcan society. So I'm going to go with that as the best of this lot.
Agreed. I will also agree that the Kirshara episode 9 brought home the goods, and had real stakes that affected real change in moving forward. Not only what we see for the rest of the series, but then also looking at the Vulcans as we jump forward into TOS and how they're how they effectively become part of the Federation instead of being a kind of frenemies, as it were. And then looking at
the Mean Girls.
Yeah, the Mean Girls. Yeah, exactly. You can't sit with us. Oh god, that would be a great one. I still like Space Elf Jeeves, but you can't sit with us is also not.
If we have someone who can do art in our listeners, please make the Vulcan High Command is the Mean Girls.
Yes, exactly.
Knowing Admiral Forrest, they can't sit there.
Yeah, hit us up over on Threads or certainly in our Facebook group. We would absolutely love that.
Sorry,
that'd be fantastic. But going between episodes 10 and 11. I agree that episode 10, to Aaron's point, the predictability was waning, but episode 11, the Observer Effect, just the lack of stakes. Nobody's going to die, and while it was great to see some characterization of the Organians, and then obviously the reveal at the end that it was the Organians. Again, it just felt very low stakes, no stakes, and I just didn't necessarily care for that. So, Peter,
I'm going to have to pretty much echo what everyone else said about Kirshara being the best out of the bunch. It's just a great episode. I really like how they tied in all the things.
All the things.
Like how we had the Romulan tease at the end, how we had, Shran is always a fun character to have on there.
Oh, yes.
I love Shran. He's such a lovable douchebag. There's just lots of good things in Kirshara with like developing Vulcan culture, and how in the end it's like, hey, maybe we can actually be allies and friends this time and equals, right. And that was something that you hadn't seen up until that point, and that was really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As for my least favorite, I'm probably gonna go with Observer Effect, just because I remember the first time that I watched it and I was just like, what?
Huh?
Like I understood what was going on, and I didn't fall asleep during it, but it was just like, because of how it was bouncing around perspective wise, it felt sometimes a little disjointed. Whereas Daedalus, as odd and predictable as some of it is, like it's at least a cohesive through line.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas Observer Effect, sometimes because of your jumping, it's like, here's Archer and Flux, and they're actually it's just them, and they're talking about this, and now we have the Organians, and sometimes just like, okay, who's who, what's what,
who's not first.
So it's just because of some of that disjointedness, it's just kind of a little lower down.
Yeah. Fair. All right. Well, cool. Well, that takes us to the end of the episode. Thanks, as always, friends, for joining us. Aaron, where do people find you out there in the world?
Well, yeah, you can find us at ussrhapsody.org. That'll have a link to all of our socials on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Awesome. Jen, how about you?
I've got a link tree that's linktree.com/JenWatsonArt. On there, you'll find links to all of my socials, as well as my Etsy shop, which is reopened now, and my author page on Screen Rant, where I write about Star Trek.
Woohoo! All right. And Peter, finally, where do people find you or stay away from you? I don't know.
Stay away. Stay away.
If you wish to be perceived.
That's right.
If you wish to be perceived. You can find me around the internet at Petrus Aquinas. I'm not terribly active, but if you ping me, I'll probably respond. You can find me on ELH's Twitch channel, playing we're starting a new game, actually, so I'm playing an ensign.
Ooh.
We haven't started yet, so Tuesday.
Very good.
Yeah, so I do that. I also help with a fan production, Starship Excelsior. Yeah.
He's doing stuff. It's good. All right. And then you can find me over on Instagram and on Threads as C3 Carpenter. Just go ahead and spell it out. As mentioned many, many times, I do run the USS Grand Petoskey with my lovely wife, April. And of course, Peter's one of our crew members as well. We're one of the bigger chapters of the International Star Trek Fan Club in the world. And of course, Aaron also is another chapter in our region, which is Region 13 of SFI, which I have the pleasure of overseeing. That includes Michigan and Eastern Canada. If you're a Trekker within the sound of my voice and in that area or even outside of it, sfi.org is a great place to find all that information, or ussgrandpetoskey.com. And ping us. We're happy to pin you up with Trekkers wherever you're at. So once again, everybody, thanks for joining up. I'm going to tell you that sharing is caring, and to keep on trekking.
Be the Starfleet you wish to see in the world.
Thank you, everybody. Remember, 1,000 stars means 1,000,000 maybes.
Peace and long life.
This podcast is part of the Secret Friends Unite podcasting network. Visit secretfriendsunite.com for more great shows, articles, news, reviews, and more. Secret Friends Unite podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other podcast services around the world. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, you can join us on Facebook or our new Discord server, or follow @SecretFriendsU on Twitter. Please subscribe to Secret Friends Unite on YouTube and visit our merch store at tpublic.com. Just search Secret Friends Unite. Thanks for listening.